Hello, and welcome to Relevate Presents Scholarship, the podcast where we use real research to analyze, scrutinize, and humanize your favorite TV and movie couples. I'm your host, Eric Goodcase. Hey everyone, welcome back to Relevate Presents Scholarship. We have a very special episode for you today because we have not one but two guests for you. First guest is I forgot to look up your title, Associate Dean of Student Affairs. Is that right?
Associate Dean of Student Affairs and Program Services.
Oh, nice.
It's technically what it is.
Gotcha.
Technically what it is.
Gotcha.
Basically, I handle the student side of the experience in the College of Education.
Oh, very cool. And that voice is Dr. Nicholas Jordan. Thank you for joining us.
Absolutely.
And our second guest is a familiar guest with a not so familiar title in front of his name. So we have the newly Dr. Denzel Jones. Denzel, thanks for coming back.
Yeah, I appreciate being on.
How's it feel?
It's still kind of settling in. It's very sometimes my head gets a little big, and then sometimes I bought down really quickly. So it's still pretty much a roller coaster where I'm at right now, just trying to make sense of it all and wrap my head around what it really means and making something out of it. But it's cool. I like it.
All right.
I can get used to it.
All right. As long as you're not too grown up with the doctor title, not to talk Nickelodeon in the future.
I'm a little grownish, but
grownish, nice.
See what I did there?
Nice, that's beautiful. So if you haven't read the title already, we're going to be talking about the sitcom Blackish today. But before we get into that, I wanted to give Dr. Jordan, I'll give you the opportunity to talk a little bit about your research and clinical interest, just kind of the things you're doing in that part of your life.
All right. So I'm a marriage and family therapist. I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist. By training, my research interests revolve primarily around online relationships created, maintained, and terminated in the online space, and that's through social media and through online video games. But where my career has taken me and kind of just my responsibility existing in this world as Black and male, I have been drawn to and kind of, I wouldn't say pushed to, but encouraged to be a part of, issues of, conversations and work and research and, therapy, things like that, like just around multiculturalism, just around issues of context, race, class, gender, sexual orientation, religion, things like that. So I've been pushed in that direction and drawn in that direction, even though, I'm a large child and I spend most of my time playing video games.
Right.
But that's pretty much what I do research wise.
Yeah, and I think that it's important to note that even though we as researchers have lots of very serious interests, we also have very potentially childish interests as well. I think we all do at some level.
I have no serious interests.
Fair enough.
No serious interests.
And
if it were up to me, I'd just be playing video games. I kid you not. Like I would not be doing anything useful for the academy or anything like that.
Fair enough.
I will say that one of the things that I've appreciated and just coming up behind you, kind of following your footsteps and watching you do the research that you do is just learning how to take that thing that you're so passionate about and like not lose that in your role as a professor and like still integrating yourself into the work that you do. And so that's something that I've always admired from afar. I may not have ever came out and said that, but it's pretty cool to watch and witness.
I appreciate that.
Yeah, man. Yeah.
How do you keep that passion burning?
How do I keep that passion burning, man? I don't know. I have, it's so much in terms of passion around like my research interests, things like that, like so around video games and doing that kind of work. For me, it's just, it's always what I've done. And it's always been something that's just kind of been in me. A lot of people look at me like I'm crazy. How are you, 38 years old? You are a father. How are you still doing this so seriously? And I look back at them like, you're just mad. You just mad that I get to have fun and you don't. And so I don't know. It's just in me. as far as the issues of context, multiculturalism, things like that, it's honestly, if I wouldn't do it if I didn't have to. I wouldn't do it, but I'm usually the only person out there screaming, and in the circles that I run in.
Yeah.
So I mean, I got no choice. It's me. I got to stand in that gap. I got to be the one to do it. So
For sure.
I do it.
For sure. We appreciate that.
Absolutely.
Thanks.
All right, and Dr. Jordan, you also have a podcast of your own. Would you like to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. I have a podcast, What's Your Truth, that comes out of Appalachian State University. We are basically, the whole point of the show is trying to find people's truth and how they, and how they see the world. What are the things we really believe in, and what are the things what are the things that are fungible in our lives? For me, I'm very much so a person that I have very few beliefs, and people think that, hey, or at least I often get the people argue with me and say, oh, that just, you don't stand for anything because you have so few beliefs. But when you hear me talk, I'll argue about anything and for anything and against anything with absolute, it'll sound like I have absolute certainty, but I don't. And so what matters to me is finding those things that I really can latch on to because I have so few of them. So I go out and talk to interesting people and see if they can kind of co-opt me into their truth. And that's the whole show.
Very cool. Very cool. And I actually did give your podcast a listen a while ago now. It was you and another student talking about your experience with your fathers. And it was very interesting. It was very moving. It was great. I advise anyone, if you're listening to this, to check it out. It was very good.
Thank you.
Yeah. All right. So before we get into Blackish, we're actually completely by coincidence, and I mean that completely seriously. Usually I'm not serious. This time I mean serious. Completely by coincidence, we're recording our Blackish podcast on Juneteenth. There's a special Juneteenth episode of Blackish. So I wanted to take this opportunity to learn more about Juneteenth because I actually didn't know very much about it at all.
For sure.
So Denzel, if you want to take it away and.
For sure. And I'll definitely say I'm not gonna get on this microphone and put it on wax and pretend like I know everything that there is to know about Juneteenth. And so I'm not a mouthpiece for the whole community and what we know about Black culture and what Blackness is. And so Jordan, as I'm just kind of going through, if you have anything you want to add, people at home in the cars listening, you have any expert advice, expert knowledge, feel free to chime in, get up with us.
Tweet
tell
us
us where
at
we missed the mark.
Podcast or email us at relevatepodcast@gmail.com.
Yeah, there. Go there. Just kind of educate us a little bit. We know things. We don't know everything. So be willing to help out. But in talking about Juneteenth, when we really think about it, we kind of have to go back to January 1st of 1863. When we think about when the Emancipation Proclamation first became effective. And so President Abraham Lincoln issued this Emancipation Proclamation, and basically what it did is declared that all slaves were freed. And so it's important to note that during the Emancipation Proclamation, when this was issued and when it took effect was during the Civil War. And so because of this, planters and slaveholders migrated to Texas in order to them and their slaves, they took their slaves to escape the fighting that was going on during this war. And so when we think about Texas, it's more just geographically isolated from just some of the more prominent battlegrounds, some of the more prominent battleground states where they were having this war. And so the slaves of Texas were not freed by the Emancipation Proclamation. A lot of these slaves didn't know about what was going on. They didn't hear about General Robert E. Lee surrendering. They didn't know anything about the Emancipation Proclamation. All this news just moved very slowly. And so on June 18th, 1965, the Union General Gordon Granger, he went out to Texas, and on the following day of June 19th, he read out the General Order Number 3, which announced the total emancipation for all of the slaves. And so during that time, around 1865, in Texas, they were estimated to be about 250,000 slaves.
Wow.
And after this announcement, the newly freed slaves just rejoiced in the streets. They were finally free, and they were happy to hear that this great news had come about. And so then that following year, the newly freed men organized the first celebration of Juneteenth in Texas. And so today, Juneteenth, which is just it's a portmanteau of June and 19th, it is celebrated on June 19th as just another Independence Day or a day of freedom. And so within our local communities, just a lot of communities hold different types of celebrations where people will come together and fellowship, sharing food, barbecue, just traditional modern Black arts, music, dancing, games, and other events, and just a sharing of the history of what Juneteenth is. And so with that said, I will also say that, personal opinion, Juneteenth is still not something that's very much talked about. Not a lot of people still know about it. And so this is something that I just hope to continue to see just kind of catch traction, something that's continued to be talked about more and continue to be celebrated more. Mm-hmm. So as far as Juneteenth, that's the knowledge that I know about it. Mm-hmm. Jordan, I don't know if you had anything you wanted to add.
No, you covered.
Yeah.
You covered it.
Yeah.
I do like to think about it as a Black Independence Day. And when I think about it like that, it kind of makes, getting on the grill even more fun.
Yeah.
In that kind of moment.
For sure.
Yeah. Being foolish. I love it.
Yep.
I love it.
Yep.
Yeah. In the episode on Blackish, Dre mentions, he calls it Independence Day or makes a reference to Independence Day. And I was like, that connection was not something I had made in my mind before. And I was just like, that's a really cool way to think about it. So,
for sure. And I think, and so I know even for me, Juneteenth is something that I recently found out myself. And when I say recently, I mean within the past couple of years. Mm-hmm. And it just, so I guess quick segue. So I grew up in the South, fourth grade, learning about state history in Virginia. Mm-hmm. And so, of course, we learned about all the slavery and indentured servantry and all of that stuff that goes on. And this is where we really see just how big of a thing miseducation really is, because it wasn't until I was in my, just emerging adulthood ages where I even learned that Juneteenth was even a thing, let alone what it was and what it meant or what it represented. And so, miseducation is super huge. So it's important for us to just continue to share our knowledge with each other and what we know about different cultural pieces and different cultural aspects, because not pointing any fingers at any particular teachers, but the system as a whole is just rigged in that way.
Absolutely.
So.
Yeah, that's a good way of putting it. It's not.
And when you say miseducation, it sounds benign. It sounds benign, but
go for it.
I'm not going to call that miseducation. I think that is
What would you call it?
That is intentional malpractice, is what I would call that. Like I don't. Miseducation that's a mistake. That's an error. That we forgot to include that in today's lesson. Nah, bruh.
For sure.
That is intentional malpractice.
I can get behind
intentional systemic malpractice. But
have you coined that term? Because I think that's seriously, I can get behind that.
That's great. I
can get behind that.
No. It's just right here, first time, right here.
Okay, you heard it first, right here. You heard it first.
Intentional systemic. What was it again?
Malpractice.
Okay, I like that.
Yeah, get it in the book chapter, man.
Show enough.
That's a whole book.
Show enough. But it is it's one of those things, though. It's one of those things where we we speak about it, though, sometimes in a benign way, like it's an accident. That's not an accident that we don't know that, or that you only recently came across that. That's not an accident.
For sure.
That is not an accident.
For sure.
That says a lot, too, if we think about, in that episode, the amount of pushback Dre was getting in terms of just, talking about it or celebrating it. Mm-hmm. And a lot of the points they were making, I think, ring true in terms of, a lot of people are uncomfortable talking about slavery. A lot of white people are uncomfortable thinking about the fact that it happened, or having to kind of, confront the fact that that's part of our history. Sure. And to... I don't really have another thought of that. It was really interesting to see the pushback from everyone when Dre brought it up as
everybody wants to talk about it's in the past. Why?
Thank you.
Still dwelling on this.
Yeah,
it's in the past. I mean, and meanwhile, we live in the past. We're going back to the past in terms of making America great again and shit like that. We live in the past in terms of, we celebrate Independence Day. We celebrate, all sorts of things that happened in the past. But no. When we talk for this, we can't think about the past. It's ridiculous.
Yeah.
If we're not going to live in the past, why bother having any holidays at all?
Yeah, it comes back to we just don't want to acknowledge those pieces,
100%.
those painful pieces.
For sure.
We don't have to look those things in the face.
For sure.
It's like, oh, this is a part of our history. This is kind of, where we've come from. And then if we do that by extension, we don't want to have to talk about, hey, perhaps some of that is why we're here where we are today. Now that's definitely a conversation we don't want to have.
For sure.
So what would you suggest, and this question is for both of you, whoever wants to answer, in terms of persons listening to this podcast right now, maybe never heard of Juneteenth or maybe has heard of it but wants to make it a more part of their lives, what would kind of be, a suggestion or kind of a way of kind of changing the way the world views it right now, or even just a way to celebrate it in the future?
Go for it, Denzel.
Yeah, put me on spot here. So I would say Dr. Jones. So I would say, and not just specifically like with the holiday of Juneteenth, but just Black culture in general. I would say, don't be afraid to talk about it. Don't be afraid to ask. I think one type of conversations that I have the most unease about is when I can tell that people genuinely want to know more, but they're tiptoeing around subjects, or they're afraid to say this or afraid to say that.
Absolutely.
I'm like, let's be raw with each other. Say what you have to say. Like, I want to make that comfortable space. So if you mess up and say something wrong, like, we can correct that here. Like, I'm comfortable doing that. I want you to be comfortable, and maybe not comfortable. Comfortable is not the right word because it's going to be an uncomfortable conversation.
Right.
But I want this to be a space to where we can just be raw and vulnerable with each other and have that. I don't want you to feel like you have to tiptoe or that you're going to offend me or whatever the case may be. So I just think having conversations about personal experiences can be powerful.
Absolutely.
Although it is good to do your own research, it is good to find other media outlets. I think just having those genuine conversations with people can be helpful.
Absolutely.
And is your question talking about white people?
White people, Black people,
in
other
general.
cultures. I think probably want to talk about that in terms of both.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm gonna talk about white people. So I would say white folks want to know more about, if you want to figure out a way to kind of engage Juneteenth in a particular way, go pick up a book by Tim Wise called White Like Me and read that book. After you read that book, go talk to another white person about race. That is the perfect way to engage Juneteenth, to celebrate Juneteenth. Practice talking about race with white people, not with your person of color friends, not them. Talk to the white folks about race. Have those conversations, and that to me would be proper celebration.
I love that.
Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah.
And read the book.
Yeah.
White Like Me, seriously.
Yeah.
Learn about privilege, power, oppression, all those things, and go talk to white people.
And to add to that, I think one of the most dangerous things that we could possibly do, white, Black, other, whatever the case may be, is a little bit of information is the most dangerous piece of information that you could have. So when you're educating yourself, don't read 1, 2, 3 lines. I'll read the beginning of the paragraph, the end of the paragraph. I'll see what they're talking about on the news. Get the full picture. Formulate your own ideas based off of an educated stance.
Yeah.
So that little bit of information can hurt.
Absolutely. There's so much misrepresentation of different ideas out there. And if you were to just type in something like white privilege into Google and just read what you find, you would have a very different idea of what that means than what was intended. And I think based on at least what I've seen at this point, when there's backlash against terms like that, it's just a complete misunderstanding of the idea. So I think it's really important to kind of like what you're saying, not just read a line here or there, not just like even not just read one thing, but to really kind of like immerse yourself in what's out there and be able to make an opinion of your own out of the different information that's out there.
And I'll echo that. I think that's really important, immersing yourself. I think talking to people who know about, who are experts in power, privilege, oppression, those types of things, race, class, gender, sexual orientation, talking to those folks who are actual experts in those fields and in that kind of understanding, I think is important. I also think that we fall into the trap that because we have a race or because we have a gender or because we have a sexual orientation that somehow qualifies us and makes us an expert in speaking about those things.
Yep.
And so because I had that and I have an experience around race, somehow I don't need to do any more reading. I don't need to do any kind of investigation. I can just kind of talk about it, and that's some bullshit.
Exactly.
Like, no,
100%.
we have to engage people who know about these things, hear these things, and understand these things.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. You can't. A thing I've heard a lot, and had a friend who had a really rough occurrence with this, where she was talking about privilege, and the person said, "Well, like I didn't have an easy life. You're trying to say I was privileged," and it's like you're not getting the whole point of it. Just because you are white doesn't mean you understand the idea of white privilege. Just because you are black doesn't mean you understand everything around, what oppression and being black means as well.
For sure.
I get caught in those conversations all the time where, well, I didn't grow up with it. I didn't have it easy. That's not what I'm saying.
Yeah.
That's not what I'm saying. But it's hard. It's hard. It's hard to, and talk about this all the time in classes and presentations and things like that, in manuscripts that are written and all over the place. But when we are in a privileged position, and I'm thinking about me around gender, or someone else, a white person around race, as soon as someone starts talking to us about our privilege, we can't sit in that. We then want to respond from our subjugated self, which is part of us that may have been poor, or the part of us, like the part of me that is black. I can't. It's hard for me to sit in that space just as a male and acknowledge that, because my blackness has been such a major factor. When we're threatened, we respond from those areas of subjugation. We don't want to sit in that privilege. We don't want to do that. And just because I am black, just because I exist in this world as black, I exist in this world as black and male, and that maleness carries with it a lot of privileges that people just don't want to. Like, it's difficult for me to swallow and be black at the same time, if that makes any sense.
For sure.
Absolutely, yeah.
Look at you tossing around that postmodern narrative, subjugated languages.
Right? Tell nobody.
Love it.
Don't tell nobody.
I love it.
Listen,
All right.
games though. I do a lot. Focus on that.
I got you.
Do you have any additional thoughts do you want to add, or do we want to go into the show a little bit?
I'm good.
Ready.
All right, let's do it. So let's just talk a little bit about each of our kind of relationship with the show. We'll start, Jordan, with you in terms of talking about when you started watching the show, what kind of connected you to it, what made you made you get into it in the first place.
So for me, I started watching the show in the very beginning. I mean, here it was, this black family, who was a mess like every other family. But, they're just regular old black folk. Both of them got, they got good jobs. Kids go to school, stuff like it's just regular black people. And I like that. And they were funny. And so I thought of it, I was drawn to it because it was like I could latch on to it and replace that with replace the Cosbys with Blackish. So that really was what it was for me. It really was. I could love this family and not have to remember the ugly stuff from, Bill Cosby and all of that.
And it very much kind of mirrors the Cosby Show and kind of how it's set up, and then how they have the spinoff of the oldest daughter going to college too.
Yeah.
Right.
So how about you, Denzel? When did you first start getting into the show?
Yeah, so for me, so it was a show that I've heard about for a while, and so for me, I'm not really a big TV buff. Don't watch a lot of movies. My attention span's just really low. I've got about a good 10 to 15 minutes, and I'm just done. But it was something I've been hearing about for a while. Been hearing about it, and so whenever we reached out to Jordan, he was like, "Yeah, let's do Blackish," and I was like, "Been trying to watch it for a while, so I guess now is a better time than any. I'll sit down and just kind of do some homework."
Mm.
First episode, I was hooked. It just kind of binge watched through it. Learned a lot.
You knocked it out fast.
Wrestle,
Yeah.
Man. It's good stuff.
Yeah.
A lot to wrestle with, so I
Mhm.
won't get too much into that right now. But yeah, it's good stuff.
Yeah, it was the same as you. I heard about it. I'd been like intrigued by it, but I don't have cable, so I don't like watch shows that are like new often. If they're not on Netflix, I don't usually check it out.
Yeah.
But then once we decided we were doing the show, I was like, I'll download the ABC app and check this thing out. And same thing, I was hooked immediately. There's something about like this show that I really responded to. It was funny. It was kind of like it gets you in the feels. It does a lot of different things that I really like, and it's just a really fun show to watch, and it's quick. It's not like I kind of expect it to be kind of a typical sitcom, and it certainly has some of those tropes to it. Like there are times where it kind of goes in that road, but it's so different than a typical sitcom.
It started out that way because I really thought it had those typical sitcom kind of feel to it.
Yeah.
A lot of those like on the nose type of social observations. It started there, but recently I thought it's taken a really interesting look at marriage and relationships, which I thought has just been super powerful to see. And again, like to see regular ass black people struggle with regular ass problems. And that for me is so powerful because I see so many images, so many things that say, we're violent, over sexualized, single parent households, 9,000 children who don't go to school, things like that. Like that's what I get from media all the time. But in this show, again, regular black people, just doing regular stuff, trying to survive in this regular, just regular black people. And I am, it's like I always know that black people brush their teeth and all that stuff, but you see on TV, you know what I'm saying?
So
look at us. And so it's so refreshing. And so to see Bo and Dre, the characters in the show, go through, marriage problems, typical marriage problems, like it's like, oh man, look, we go through regular shit too. So I'm so excited for that.
So,
I love that.
If you didn't know, you know.
Yeah.
Black people go through regular struggles too.
We are regular people. We are regular people just trying to survive, just like y'all.
And it's
just like
a credit to the writers and Anthony Anderson and everyone else for how they made that so real. Like we're recording this right after the 4th season, and when we first started to plan this, like all those kind of like there was marriage stuff before, but like some really intense stuff went down at the end of the 4th season in terms of like their relationship, and the way they did it was so like real and way that as therapists we've seen before.
Yeah.
And I think it's just such a credit to everyone who's a part of that show and how like not just that they're going through regular problems, but they represent it in such a relatable, real way too.
Yeah.
So I'll start out by saying just how, so thinking about Dre and Bo as individuals, but then also as a couple, and then also as the heads of a family. And so for me, in the sense, so just kind of a brief background, not get too deep into any character development or anything. There are times where Dre, the father, he can become very much overly woke. It's the way to put it, in the sense of very, 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 very extreme Afrocentric and just his ideas and how he pushes that onto other family members. And then with Bo being multiracial, and she's more of the, I'm trying to play this logically, I'm trying to play this really even-headedly, I'm trying to to protect our family. So I can think about me as a single black male, single individual. And so for those listening, if you happen to be interested, Eric, what's our email? What's the email?
Relevate Podcast.
Relevate Podcast.
At
Hit me up.
gmail.com.
Single
That's
black
Dr.
male.
Denzel Jones.
Dr. Denzel Jones, 27 years old. But I digress.
I'm just going to say one more time, Dr. Denzel Jones.
But I digress. So I'm thinking about myself in relation to these characters, and I see Dre kind of going through these different habits, these different behaviors, and the struggle that comes along with that. And I'm so quick to jump on Team Dre. I'm like, yeah, like tell them like it is. Like this is a cold, cruel world, and like everyone should know, and like this is how like things should be done and how things should be handled. And I find myself shoulding a lot in that way. And then like something that this show has helped me to do and helped me to realize is like, as a single black male, like that's something that I can hold on to, whether it's right or it's wrong. It's something that if I wanted to, I could hold on to for the rest of my life. And it wasn't until I just kind of saw the dynamics between this couple relationship where I was like, you know, let's say I do decide I want to start dating or I do want to get married. Like, what's that going to look like? Because I know I am very passionate about this subject. I'm very passionate about this topic. What's it going to look like if I find someone who's also very passionate, someone who's not very passionate? And what are those conversations going to look like? And how are we going to present ourselves to the world? And then I'm kind of like, man, it's really heavy. That's a lot to think about. But then not only that, as systemic thinkers, and we're thinking about now, what about kids and family? How do we want to raise our kids to be in the world? How do we want to show them and talk about these difficult problems? When is the right age to talk about this? When is not the right age to talk about that? Who should be present for this conversation? And I think whenever I watch this show, in a couple of episodes, I definitely had these cool down periods where like, okay, I know I'm binging. I can't watch anymore right now. Like I have a lot that as I'm sitting through and thinking about my own processes that it's really like just playing with my head right now. And how do I make sense of all of that? And how can I use this as a platform to really see where my values and beliefs are? And so the show's been something that's challenged me in that way, particularly that couple dynamic and that family dynamic.
Yeah, for sure.
So, something I can appreciate.
Definitely.
I don't know if you had any experiences like that, Jordan, or...
You know, watching this show for me is like, so I really identify with Dre, not because of his, I think because of his beliefs, and though I subscribe to a lot of what he believes, I am ridiculous like that in my relationships. Yeah. So I just love it. I love his character. But, you know, I think one of the things I really appreciate about the show and I appreciate about Bo and Dre's relationship is that they talk about these issues of context like it's a part of their relationship. Yeah. It is not something that is kind of hidden or just comes out in explosions, you know, when they're both stressed or, you know, their screws are getting put to them. It is something that is a regular part of their relationship. And I think these conversations in healthy relationships are regular parts of relationships. So, you know, conversation around, you know, race is something that I think should be a regular conversation with all couples. Is, you know, same way with, you know, same race couples, you know, interracial couples, these kinds of things I think are great for all couples to have. Conversations about gender should be in all couples, you know, heterosexual, you know, whatever couples you should, we should be talking about issues of gender. We should be talking about issues of sexuality. We should be talking about issues of socioeconomic status. And that's what I like about the couples, that they talk about these things regularly. And not only them, but their kids too. Like, so it rubs off on their children. And that's fantastic. That's fantastic. So that for me is something that I try to subscribe to and you know, do in my own relationships.
Socialization at its finest.
Yeah. So what kinds of things would you guys suggest in terms of if a person's listening to this right now and thinking about, okay, how do I make that a part of my relationship right now? We could talk about this in terms of a heterosexual white couple, a gay couple, interracial couple, whatever. What would be suggestions for like how to start incorporating that in your relationships? You
want to take this one first?
Yeah, I mean, so how do we start talking about those issues in relationships?
Yeah.
You know, we are all bigoted. We're bigoted. We exist in this kind of this soup of a culture that is racist, classist, sexist, homophobic, all those things. We can't help but take these messages on. Mm-hmm. I think if you want to start having these conversations in a couple relationship, you start speaking your racism out loud. Start saying it, and not in a like vitriolic way, but drawing attention to how these things play out. How so just start talking about it. Just like wow, I oftentimes in my everyday life will walk down the street, and when a bigoted thought comes into my head, I won't say racist because I won't get into the academics of that. But when I have a bigoted thought in my head, I'll say it out loud, not just because I want the other person to hear it. I'm trying to start something, but because I think when I say it out loud, it sounds stupid, and so I'm like, wow, do you really think that? And so, but it gets me also talking about those things, those real things that exist in my head and exist in the relationships I have. So I would encourage a couple or anybody in a relationship to, if you want to start somewhere, start making fun of your own racist beliefs, of your own racist upbringing. Start there, and then it'll be easy. Once you get that out, it's easy to talk about this stuff.
Yeah, we all have it. We all have our own prejudice.
Always.
We all have our own things that make us tick and turn. So being able to name it, call it out, not hide from it, I can agree with that.
Absolutely.
I think so. Like a lot of that has to be done on an individual level as well.
Mm-hmm.
I think as far as if we were to talking about this in the couple dynamic, I think when we as therapists, we have our couples, they come in and we listen to some of the things they talk about. Oh, such and such didn't wash the baby bottles, or such and such doesn't take out the trash, or such and such never does this. And as we become more experienced therapists, more seasoned, we start to shift into the process and realize that this isn't about some baby bottles that didn't get washed. There's something deeper here.
Right,
and so just as talking about any other more difficult thing to talk about, being able to dig deeper, just being self-analytical, being able to stand naked in front of that mirror, stripped of all your defenses, and like Jordan was saying, just being able to call it out is, I'm not going to say it's an easy step to start with, but that's where I see it starting. You just got to learn how to face it.
Yeah, and because I don't want to be the white person asking two black people to talk about race, I'm going to also add
Thank you.
Of course.
That's important.
Thank you. Absolutely. I want to think about, I think about how my own socialization has affected me in my couple relationship. And there are a lot of times, I have a really hard time when I feel like I'm not being listened to. And that's because I'm a white male, and because everyone growing up has probably listened to me on a different level than people who maybe are female or black or of a different race or whatever the case may be. When I'm not listened to and that expectation's not being met on a personal level, that really gets to me. And it's taken me a long time to have that conversation with my fiance about this is probably there's something here about how I socialize and how that's kind of played out in why I'm reactive in certain situations or why I act a certain way. And I think it's important to kind of just wonder about those things. I don't know that for sure. I've not ever been black. I've never been a woman. I don't know if I would have been listened to differently, but just thinking about the context of, what I see around me and kind of applying that to who I am and just kind of putting that out there, wondering okay, how does this influence who I am as a person?
For sure.
If you were black and or a woman, you'd be listened to differently. I can go ahead and say that with total confidence.
For sure.
Right.
Total confidence.
For sure.
I was pretty sure, but
and so with that said, have three educated men sitting on this podcast talking to you. Three different experiences. Not one of the three of us has this whole thing figured out. It's both a process and a goal, constantly going through it. And so celebrate your shining moments, but don't stop there. It's something that has to continue to be talked about.
Absolutely. And I make mistakes all the time. And I think, saying those thoughts out loud and then just kind of seeing how ridiculous they are, talking through them, or even just kind of Denzel, what you're talking about earlier, just having that conversation with someone's it's an uncomfortable conversation to have, but mistakes happen, and just like being able to kind of like talk through that and grow from it is really important. And that's how we view all mistakes, but like there's a different connotation to talking about things like this with context, whether it's race or gender or whatever the case is. So it certainly becomes like difficult to do, but it's so important.
Sure.
True that.
For sure.
We got really off Dre and Bo, but for a very good reason.
I'll take it.
Yeah,
take
for
it.
sure.
Yeah, but Dre and Bo, yeah. I don't know. You guys have anything else you want to add?
I was thinking like
broadly add
just
to that?
thinking about like their kind of social location as well, just in terms of where they're at geographically and probably a predominantly white neighborhood.
Mhm.
Dre's job is working with mostly white people. The school is mostly white people, and it was just kind of
Except for Charlie, who I love. I love
Yeah.
Charlie.
Charlie's so funny.
That dude is funny.
Yeah.
That dude is funny. It's like how much they hate each other. It's hilarious.
Yeah, man.
I was just thinking about like identity is such an important part of Dre's life, and just thinking about his cultural identity in this context. And I was just gonna kind of put that out there in terms of like the things we've seen about Dre kind of like finding his identity or kind of developing his identity and his family's identity in this social location.
Yes. And
It makes sense to me that he is as intense as he is about his identities
Yeah.
because of his location. When we are like, if Dre was a black male around other black males and black families and things like that, he wouldn't need to be that. He
Yeah.
wouldn't need to be that. Like there'd be conversations he wouldn't need to have. It's not even, there are things that wouldn't need to even be said. But because, he's by himself and they're by themselves and out on this island alone, they then become more intense.
Yeah.
They then become more intense. Our identities get more intense when we are separated from those that look like us and behave and think and share a culture that we have. It makes sense to me.
Yeah.
His insanity. And I've noticed that in my own life where, I have, been in predominantly black communities and just how I was then, and how I am now, and how it has escalated even more as I've become an administrator, surrounded by, it is just rare to see black people in administration at this university. So, and so that identity, those identities, particularly around my blackness, becomes more intense.
Yeah. I think Jordan hit it.
Yeah.
And I would say, not to get too far off topic, it's really interesting to see as, Dre goes through those moments, Bo goes through those moments. It's really interesting to see how like Dre's parents respond or like give advice, or how just coming from, I guess, just that other generation, especially Dre's mom, who's like super into like religion and spirituality, which is particularly strong in the older black community, and just seeing how we have conversations with people who are, who have similar appearances but maybe slightly different beliefs, and just kind of what those conversations look like, and how again, it's like we're all searching for this right answer or this right way to go about it,
Right.
and we're all just continuing to do the best that we can. So for some people, is let's go pray about it. We're going to pray and it's going to fix everything. And for Dre, is I have to be unapologetic in my attitude, in my presentation, in my behavior, to make sure that I'm standing firm in my beliefs and getting the point across that I'm trying to express in a way that people understand and people hear me.
Yeah. And I think there'd be a temptation to kind of write Dre as like perfect in a sense of like, so you can kind of like get messages out in a more like coherent, clear manner, whatever you want to say it. But I love that so much of this is about like Dre is kind of an imperfect guy and he's figuring out some of this stuff, and it's it's not easy stuff to figure out.
Yeah.
And I think
Absolutely.
like having him kind of go through that process and like us seeing it and it not just being like, oh, I've achieved this level of identity or something like that. He just kind of like, he might kind of go one direction and then come back a different direction. He's still like learning as he's going, which I think is a really
Right.
cool process to watch.
For sure. And then you have people like Pops and who
Yeah.
I wish
Love Pops.
whenever I hear Pops, I was like, man, I wish I could do that. He just I would have just went out there and whooped his ass, and I was like, I wish I could do that. Sometimes I really wish I could do that. And for me, where I'm at in my life, that's probably not the best choice. So, but yeah, everyone's just trying to find their own right, their own truth, whatever that looks like for them. And
yeah, and there's no like definition of what being black means or what being white means, and like there never will be. So it's going to be it's always a constant thing. And I think it's a really good point that you bring up about like it being so highlighted when you're the only one of a particular in this case being black or go ahead.
Go back to what you said before about there's no definition of being white and no definition of being black. You think so?
In terms of what it means to be like identity wise, you know what I mean? Like not just definition like on a page, but definition in terms of like this is something that is black, like very concretely, like this is a black thing versus this is a white thing. Does that make sense?
I hear what you are saying.
Yeah.
I'm just trying to work out in my head. Do I co-sign with that?
you have
Okay,
an
for-
example or a scenario example or
Oh, I'm trying to think of something from his show. What? You go ahead.
So I'm wondering, like, so there is no definition of there is no way to be white and way to be black, and there is no definition of that. And I don't know, man. It is, in my mind, to be white is to have privilege, to have power, to have unearned access to resources. That is, particularly in this United States socio-political context, it is to have those things. Now there are other pieces too to being white, but I think that is a distinct feature of all whiteness, no matter where your whiteness is from. And I'm thinking about being a person of color. A distinct feature of your person of colorness is to be oppressed in this socio-political context. It is to be oppressed. It is to not have power. And it is to, go about in this space trying to negotiate not having power with those that do have it. So and there, of course, there are other things that go with it, but I don't know, man. I think
No, you're right.
I think I can say like that is a distinct feature of whiteness and of being a person of color for all. I can.
Absolutely.
No matter how much money I have or how little money you have, Eric. It doesn't matter. You still have this thing called whiteness. I still have this thing called blackness, and that has those things have implications that are beyond our control.
Yes, and I think that is a universal part of whiteness and blackness, and I agree. I think that definitely correct. I was just more thinking along the lines of like kind of like with Junior, how he kind of like Dre tries to get Junior to like kind of like be a particular black. Does that make sense? Yeah.
Yes.
But you 100%. I wasn't thinking about like yes, there's no like if some a particular characteristic isn't necessarily always black or always white, but this particular instance, like,
gotcha.
In terms of oppression and privilege and how we're treated as people, like it's always it's universal based on how we're perceived and how we interact with in different cultures, but still.
Yeah, Dre and Junior be ready to throw them hands sometimes behind it though. I know if Junior was like a real life kid, he got to be like fuming in his room, like air fighting. Just he got to be fuming. You want to throw them hands, got to be. But yeah, because again, those conversations they are difficult and have to wrestle with them a lot. And whether I agree with how Dre handles a lot of things or I don't agree with how Dre handles a lot of things, it's just an interesting dynamic to watch between all the characters. But it really makes you stop and question yourself and like your own beliefs and your own behaviors, how even your own ideal view of yourself. And so I think the show did a really good job of just kind of none of the characters are the same, and that's what I really appreciate. We can see
Yeah.
different ways of how blackness or whiteness or other like plays out, and
That's what I
I
love.
appreciate that.
One of the more recent episodes where Junior goes to visit Howard, and Dre thinks the visit was like the most terrible thing in the world, and then Junior comes back and he was like, it was so cool to see like black people disagreeing, like different kinds of black people, like kind of getting beyond like the idea of like, am I quote unquote black enough or any of those kinds of things, but like just seeing like
Yeah.
the diversity of what it means to be black as opposed to seeing it as like a
Blacker than thou
concrete.
type of.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. I don't know if I have anything right now. Maybe I will whenever you guys start talking. But thinking about the relationship between Pops and
Ruby.
Pops and Ruby, 'cause they had their own stuff. They have a lot of stuff
Yeah.
going
Yeah,
on
they
for
do.
them, and it's a lot there. I don't know. What do you guys think about them?
Go for it, Eric.
Pops and Ruby. They're really interesting too because they have lots of kind of like little moments as well where you can see that they were caring for each other in some way. Maybe that's not the best word considering some of their history, but like yes, they're very volatile, but there's something there, and it could be just like the bond of family or the bond of like this is a person I loved for so long, but like they have lots of little moments in between all their kind of scuffles or jokes about blowing up his boat or whatever the case is.
Yeah.
I like them a lot. I like they in a weird way remind me of my mom and dad, where they were together for a long time, fought like animals, then hated each other for a while, but then kind of circled back and became had a functioning relationship.
Yeah.
Like it's not they're I would call Pops and Ruby friends. Like, they're actual friends now. And I would call my mom and my dad when he was alive, like I would call them friends, and coming from that really difficult time. Like it's really cool to see that, you can get to that in that relationship. And that, in my mind, gives a lot, I thought is hopeful for, it could be seen as hopeful for couples who are separating, and even, kids, who are older children, perhaps seeing this type of relationship, seeing this kind of doubling back that Pops and Ruby are doing, that perhaps, there's hope for every relationship, no matter how awful it is, that maybe they can find some kind of equilibrium, some kind of,
For sure.
connection that, someday, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And that's so difficult to do. Yeah.
And thinking back even to, I think one instance stands out. I can't remember the exact details of the episode, but they were trying to get into a restaurant, or they were trying to get parking or something, and somebody cut them in the line, and Dre and Dre was kind of trying to kind of beat around it, like, oh, we're just waiting. All right, I'm not gonna say anything. And then Pops went and stepped out, and he was like, hey, young blood, like, you're not gonna just come in here and like skip my family, da 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 da.
Right.
So he like just told like it was, and then to see, Ruby kind of gravitate towards that, and it's just cool to see how like as much as they get on each other's nerves and like they would destroy each other's property or like take sly digs at each other, like they wouldn't let some outside force come between whatever it is that they have, and I think that's something that can be powerful
Yeah,
too.
that's huge.
And they both live with Dre and Bo. Like they both live there.
Yeah.
So, I mean, how cool is that? Like they live in the, under the same roof.
Yeah.
And she still brings him a plate on Easter.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so like you were saying, there's however it may look, there's hope for a lot of different relationships that may seem hopeless. And it's easy to say that right now, sitting in the space that I am, like not being in that situation. But just like you were saying, Jordan, from personal experience and kind of being the kid in that situation and seeing that happen with your own eyes, I think you could speak a little bit more to that than I can, of like just what that looks like and how that could look, and just all those different aspects and avenues of that being a thing. And
Right,
so
right.
where I'm at now, I couldn't say that I could successfully pull that off, but never know. In the future, if that were to be the case, maybe I could. We'll hopefully not, Steve, but
Yeah.
We would like to interrupt your current listening experience to introduce you to another podcast you might like.
I'm Elisa Lucas from Best Forevers, a podcast for kindred spirits. I'd like to start a movement where we spend more time loving on our friends because although friends are important to us, they're often in the shadow of other relationships. So if you want to love on your friendships a little bit more, embrace friendship a little bit more, or just appreciate your friendships a little bit more, then this podcast is for you. We'll explore all the different ways friendships take place, share the amazing stories of friendship, and discuss best practices for the difficulties that friends may experience. It's time to embrace friendships because without our friends, who would we be? So check out Best Forevers on iTunes, Stitcher, and all the other podcasting listening venues. And be sure to follow Best Forevers Pod on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter.
So what about I guess when we think about Blackish, Jordan, you already started talking about this a little bit with we were talking about the Cosbys a little bit earlier, and how we think about the Cosbys, the Jeffersons, Good Times, Fresh Prince. Kind of how do you see this sitcom, this TV series, kind of fitting into the mold of Black media, or maybe not fitting into the mold of, I guess, traditional Black media, Black sitcoms? Question for Eric too.
So, at least for me, I see this show like. So it doesn't fit the mold in that the cast, is primarily Black. Like, there's been this push in Hollywood, around, having more people of color. We see it in movies, like, we see it in movies, we see it in TV shows, having more people of color, more LGBTQIA folks, more women stars. And we see this more and more, less stereotypical, behavior and those tropes that Eric was talking about before. It's less that. And so I think, in a way, it's a step forward. I think it's a step forward in media in general, and the fact that it's kind of attained this broad appeal is really cool. And broad appeal, not just because it's, like I said, regular Black people on the screen, but it is, Black people talking about Black issues, which is huge because, the Cosbys didn't talk, they rarely did they bring up Black issues. You know what I mean? So, but this show it started like the entire first season, I think, was just about Black stuff.
From the pilot.
I know, right? Somehow it managed to stay on TV.
Yeah.
And so I think in that way, it's a big step forward. A big step forward. I mean, sure, it's got its problematic pieces, lots of discussing gender stuff that happens in it. But I think, where it fits when you look at the history of, Black people on television, Black families on television, it's definitely a step forward.
For sure.
And I think it's cool how many, like, what you're saying, how many, like, kind of, like, Black culture-centric shows, movies are out there and that are mainstream. Like, Black Panther was huge. And that was, like, that wasn't just, like, about a Black superhero. That was about African culture, like, Black culture. Like, that wasn't just a superhero movie.
That was something that people could get behind and celebrate the success of something.
Yeah.
It was a cultural event.
Yeah, exactly.
It's
like
a cultural event.
Atlanta.
And there are I'd agree with you in that, there are more, like Black centered and person of color centered, movies and television out there now. But I would still argue that the vast majority, is not that. And because I think it's because there's just a little bit more now. It's kind of our radar is so skewed that when we see it and we notice it, then we're blown away. Like it feels like a lot more.
Absolutely.
So I think, relatively speaking, we got a long way to go, but I think we could be moving in a good direction.
For sure.
That's a really good point, because if you go from like 1 to 4, that's a huge jump. But if that's in a sea of 1,000, that's nothing.
Yeah.
No, that's huge. It's
Yeah.
definitely huge steps. And my hope is with things like the Me Too movement and how it's just decimated Hollywood in terms of
Yeah.
Hollywood.
Yep.
I hope there's going to be more, just better portrayals of women and LGBTQIA communities, things like that. Because perhaps maybe Hollywood will be get a little better and a little less disgusting. So hopefully on the horizon there's going to be a bit more of this.
And just real quick, this is beyond my soapbox. Put money behind those things. If you care about this and like, if you want to see more like people like Hollywood, whatever responds to us putting our money at it. So like, go to those movies, check out things. If you support what you care about, like if you care about stuff, whether it's whatever in media or products or whatever the case is, like it's really important to like keep sending the message to people who make stuff, produce stuff, that you want more.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I would even add the other side of that is don't support those things that have awful depictions.
Yes.
Don't support those things. Save your money. Keep your money for those other things. Like be selective in what you view. Like be critical, in what you view. So
Sure.
yes, 100% what you're saying.
Yeah.
Don't underestimate your influence on those things. Yes, you're only one consumer, but like when you put all the consumers together, that's a huge thing. And keep talking about it, but yeah, be really mindful about how you kind of use your money and use time and things like that.
Shout out to Social Psych.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think just to add on to what you were also saying earlier, Jordan, just about the difference in the Blackish and just kind of some of the more, I guess for lack of better terms at the moment, traditional Black TV shows. And so I wasn't sure if this was an age thing, but as you were speaking, it kind of helped me confirm a little bit. And so when I was younger and watching like Fresh Prince and the Cosby Show and things like that, like I would see it, I would get engaged with the episode, and it was like I wouldn't really notice, a lot behind just some of the addressing some of the issues that were going on in the world at that time. And then like as being older and like, you go to Facebook and you see like small 15-second clips that have been buried in an episode, another 25, 30-minute episode, and you see a 15-second clip and you say, oh, like Uncle Phil was talking about this all along, or like such and such said this a long time ago. And I was like, but I don't remember really engaging in those shows in that type of way. And so like with this show, and again, like I was saying before, I couldn't tell if it was because I was younger when I was watching these shows or if it was really just because of this show. And again, listening to you just kind of speak on that as well, kind of helped me solidify just my beliefs in this show. I just appreciate how much they attack it. They don't they don't back down from it. It's not some 15-second clip that I'm going to look at 15 years down the line and say, oh, that's what they meant. It's
the entire first season.
Yeah, they're really getting into it. So yeah, they're getting into it.
My favorite, I think, my favorite episode of Blackish was after Trump was elected.
Yeah.
I know it's a Trump conversation is different for y'all way out there as opposed to, over here. I'm just going to be honest. So, if what I'm saying causes a little bit of trouble for y'all, just let them, just give my contact information and I'll talk to them for you.
Okay.
Blame it on me.
So Jordan, so right there, Jordan just override the producer, so none of this is on me.
Okay. So my favorite episodes after Trump got elected, the whole episode was talking about people's reaction to it, how it happened, people's hurt. People are, some folks are happy. Some folks are like, oh, this is a win for bigotry and racism and sexism and homophobia. Oh, this is a big loss for those of us who believe in social justice and yada, yada, yada. And the whole episode, Dre's trying to get some work done. He's doing some work, for his job. The first time you actually see him trying to actually get work done on the job. And at the end of the episode, you start talking about, Dre, they're coming at Dre about like, Dre, why aren't you fired up about this? He keeps trying to move the conversation to stuff about work, but when they get in that little thing, when 4 of them are sitting there talking about
Yeah.
funny stuff on the job. Like, he's trying to actually do work. And so they're questioning him about why he's not talking about, Trump and what this means. And, and Dre's like, hey, this has been happening for years and years and years. Where you been?
Mhm.
Where you been? I'm sorry, I got to go back to work. I don't know what y'all are upset about. This is not new for me. And I thought that was so powerful. And you would never see anything like that.
Yeah.
I can't say never, but it's highly unlikely that you would ever see anything like that on those old shows. Like that was an indictment, not only of I think Trump and the culture and the backlash that has created Trump, but also an indictment of, I think, of our response to it. Like we're responding, and it was so powerful. We're responding in a way that is where we are amazed and dumbfounded. Where they've been calling me a nigga for all of my life. Like that is just the world I exist in. And for Dre, it's like, of course this happened. Of course this happened. Why are you surprised? Why are you surprised? So what am I gonna do? It's the same thing that black folks always do. We go back to work. We go back to work because that's all there is. And why am I surprised? Yeah. Why am I surprised? I gotta take care of my family. I'm not gonna get caught up in this stuff that that's been happening for years and years just because white folks kind of just like, oh man, can you believe it? Yeah. Nah, bro, it's been happening. That kind of thing would never or would not have happened. It is unlikely it would have happened. That kind of message in those older shows.
Absolutely.
And even as you're talking about that, something came up to me because leading up to this episode, those are the exact same things that Dre had been trying to drill in there for so long. And so now it's like, okay, now that someone, media, quote unquote, who has a more powerful, influential voice has said something about it, oh, now you want to believe it. Now you want to take it seriously. Well, if you're listening to it, I'm going to give you the space to listen to it. But for now, like, this is my time to go back and do what I got to do to keep surviving. And so it's just weird to see it. I mean, weird, but
yeah,
sad. It's terrible to see, like, just speaking in TV terms, it's been X amount of episodes where I've been telling you this, and it takes one moment for you to finally stop and say, oh, the world's not right.
Welcome to I got to go back to work.
Yeah.
Like, you want to get stuck here, you get stuck here. I'm going back. I got to get back on the job.
Yeah.
So.
And a few percentage points here and there, and people would never have even talked about it after that.
Exactly.
Yep.
So I know I did definitely have at least one more thing that I wanted to talk about. And I want to create some space for you guys if you guys want anything else. But do you guys remember the episode where Jack was performing at the talent show at school and he was singing Gold Digger? He was singing Gold Digger. I said the N-word at the school. Yeah. The school went crazy. Parents came. They had that whole all that debacle. So Jordan, that actually reminded me of an event. I don't know if we ever openly discussed it or talked about it that actually happened in your class whenever I was.
Oh gosh.
So yeah, remember we used to make us do that terrible exercise where we had to stand on one side of the room whether we agreed with it. Yeah,
yes.
The worst exercise. I make my students do that. By the way, they hated it every bit as I hated it. They hated it too. So, and I remember one of the questions where I can't remember exactly how it was worded, but it was something along the lines of, could derogatory terms be used even if it's by the group of people in which the term is about? And so I remember standing on the yes side, a bunch of other classmates standing on the no side. I'm not going to say any names. I'm going to try to keep that confidential. If I screw up, I'm the producer, so I guess I can make it say what I wanted to say. But yeah, I remember standing on the yes side, and I remember talking about I was right around between the times where I had came out with 2 separate mixtapes. And I remember saying, yeah, like whenever I rap, like I say nigga a lot. And like, for me, it's just kind of whatever. And so like, this is at a place where I am first starting to kind of challenge myself in that way. And so yeah, I was kind of like, yeah, I mean, it's just kind of whatever. Like, yeah, I probably shouldn't do it, but it's just kind of whatever. I just do it. And then I remember it was some classmates who were like, I say it around my friends and like they say it's okay. And I was like, no, we're like you're white. Like you can't do that. Like, don't do that. But anyways, I remember after that class, one of the students had came up to me and she said, whenever you kept saying that word in class, it made me feel really uncomfortable. And then I'm like, me, just soft-hearted Denzel, just kind of, I was like, oh, I'm sorry, like I didn't mean to offend you, and da-da-da-da-da. And like sitting where I am today, again, it's both a process and a goal. Becoming the man who I am today, the person who I am today, looking back on that moment, I go, you know what? Like me knowing what that word means, knowing what appropriation is, knowing that from the stance that I take, there's no way that I can use that term to belittle another person in the sense of I don't have a hierarchical position over another person of color, another Black person in that sense. And knowing what appropriation means to me, appropriation means to my culture, and knowing that I made someone uncomfortable from saying the N-word, it was just almost like I'm at a place of acceptance where, yes, I'm happy that person felt uncomfortable because they should have felt uncomfortable. And like, that's not something comfortable that they should like, that's not a word that should sit well with them. And so like, looking back on it.
It should feel good to you.
Yeah.
It should feel good to you.
So looking back on it, I'm like, what if they didn't say they were uncomfortable? Or what if they say, yeah, I'm glad you said it, and da-da-da-da-da-da. And so like, I don't know, it feels good for me to be able to, I guess, come to terms and look back and see how much growth that I made from the beginning of my processes. Just kind of relating it back to Jack and the family and watching them go through their own processes of what that means and how they want to make sense of it. I don't know, we just, again, celebrate the milestones. Don't be afraid to look to where you come from. See the growth that you made. Don't stop growing. And I don't know, it's a process and a goal. It's just, that's something that, just a term or I guess a phrase that I've really come to embody and to enjoy lately.
So just first, before I even say anything else about this, let me just give a public service announcement to all the white folks that might be listening. Eric, everybody, all white people, let me just say to you, it is never okay to use the N-word. It is never okay. It is not healthy for you.
It doesn't matter what your Black friends say.
Don't let your Black friends get you in trouble by telling you that you can say that word. That'll get you in trouble. Just trust me on this. You don't get to say that word, and you will have a much healthier and longer lasting life by not using that word. So just say that.
Yes.
Yes. And I'm kind of, I often have arguments with my Black male friends about using this word, and I'm thinking about a particular friend that I argue with hardcore about, but he says, no, we shouldn't be using that word and all that stuff. And you know what? I hear his point. I think they are valid. I get why it's not a good idea for me to use that word. And I'm going to use that word, and I use it liberally. Like I do. I do. It's just what I do. It's just a part of my language. I mean, I get that it's problematic, and I also get that it's my word to use. But what I do say is that for those folks who have a conversation with me about it is, that use of that word and whether or not we can say that is something that the Black community gets to decide. Yeah. We get to have that debate. Mm-hmm. And people who are a part of that group get to have that debate. Now, anybody outside of that group, you could be white, Latino, you could be Asian, you could be all sorts of stuff, but you don't get a say in that conversation. Yeah. That is for us to decide. In the same way that you'll never hear me say the B word when referring to a woman. Mm-hmm. You'll never hear me say the F word when referring to a person of the LGBTQIA community. Yeah. You'll never hear me use those words because I'm not in that community and don't have any kind of, and I'm thinking about in a way that is, I think about my use of the M word, that term of endearment, connection kind of thing. Like, never catch me using any other of those slurs that refer to other groups that I'm not a part of because I'm not a part of that group. I don't get to decide. Yeah, I don't get to decide. But you just won't get. You won't ever hear me say that. But as far as the N word in terms of my group, that's you're gonna hear me say it, and that's a conversation, an argument we're gonna have. But make no mistake, if you're not a part of the group, you don't get to say it. Yes, it's not fair. Yes, it's hypocritical. I don't care how you feel about it. That's just the way it is.
And no loopholes either on any of those terms. Or ER, it doesn't matter. Yeah, don't look for the loopholes. Just don't go it.
It's a song, you can still get punched in the face. Yeah. don't get caught rapping it or singing it. Like it's not healthy for you. It's not healthy.
For sure.
There was a video going around recently. Did you see this? It was at a concert.
The Kendrick Lamar concert?
Yeah, it was Kendrick Lamar, and
Yeah.
someone came on stage. I don't remember exactly what happened, but she said the N-word in the song.
Multiple times.
Multiple times?
Multiple times.
Oh, I didn't hear that part.
Yeah.
And he corrected her. And I
Mhm.
thought it was a really good, experience for people to see that happen. And it wasn't in a way that was detrimental to her. It wasn't. He wasn't like shaming her in any way.
Yeah.
He was just kind of like,
Shut the club
Correcting it.
down, corrected it,
yeah, exactly.
got it back up and running.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was just one point I wanted to be sure to touch on. And again, I don't think we ever had that conversation about that experience before, but I wanted to thank you for just kind of being that catapult for me to just learn more about myself, learn and to wrestle with those things, learn how to love myself more, learn how to love my community more. And so I appreciate you and all the mentorship that you have given, continue to give. So
Oh,
thank you
man.
for that, man.
I appreciate that. That's very kind words.
Yes,
Thank you.
sir. Yes, sir.
And I'm just trying to live in your world. I'm gonna come work for you soon. I'm gonna come work for you.
Okay. I'll be Big Dr. J and you be Little Dr. J.
Yeah, there it is.
We can do
There
that.
it is. I'm okay with that.
We can do that.
I'll ride your coattail.
Gas me up. Gas me up.
This is beautiful to watch, by the way. I'll be outside here.
Yeah. Do you guys have any final points or anything that you want to talk
I
about?
had one more thing, but I wanted to leave it up. Jordan, if you got anything else that you wanted to...
No. I'm good. I'm good.
Okay.
You tell me.
Let's wrap up talking about the last bit of season 4, just because it was so kind of strong, and we started to see Dre and Bo's relationship kind of fray a little bit, and then it kind of got back together at the end. So what was your kind of reactions watching that? Because that was pretty... I was pretty emotional watching it.
Yeah.
It was pretty intense.
Yeah, it was hard. It was that was something that I cannot personally relate to. I'm not gonna say my parents never have. I can't speak on their relationship, but I've never seen anyone that I've cared so much about come to a point that was like that close. And so to watch that was something like, oh man, I really don't know how this is going to work out, and it's really hard, especially how like I just can't turn off that therapist brain, right? And so like you can see these things as they're happening, you can see them before they happen, and you just go, oh man, like if you just do this so differently, like this could be so much better, or if you just try this instead, and like this could be so helpful. And to be on the outside watching that and knowing that, like Jordan was saying, these are real problems that real people deal with, and they portray it in such a way. It's just really difficult to watch someone fall down that hole when you feel like you may have an answer, and that answer may be great for you, and it's easy to talk about. When I'm behind the mirror watching, doing supervision and watching clients, and I'm saying the therapist could do this or the therapist could do that. It's really easy when it's not you and you're not involved in it. But to watch that and to try to just sit with that emotionally and just watch it and it's just tear apart slowly.
Yeah.
Like it was not a quick Band-Aid. They didn't try to like ease our anxiety about it, and to just watch that slowly happen. It was I definitely took a lot of cool down periods in watching those last couple of episodes. And
It was a slow motion train.
I would go to bed and like I was like, okay, I can't watch Blackish before I go to sleep anymore. Because
I know, yeah, it hurt. There was no point. There were not trying to help you feel better about it. Not trying to help you feel better.
That was my experience with it.
I kept waiting for something to happen, or for like I was having the same experience with you. I was just like, Dre, just do this, or Bo, just say this, like just. That's all you have to do, and
or I can tell you're really trying to say something that's important, and it's right there, and if you could just get it out. And
there were so many times where something like came together, like when Junior gave his speech and the whole family came together, and then they fought like right after that. You're just like, it built you up a little bit, and then it was just like, oh, we're right back where we started. And they really did an amazing job, like pulling on your heart a little bit.
What do you think, Jordan? What do you got, Jay?
Yeah, man. It was difficult. It's been difficult to watch. It's just difficult. It is. It is. Like I was saying, there's no they're showing the realness of it. And again, why I appreciate the show, why I love seeing this regular black couple go through this. I know it's kind of sadistic in a weird way, but I love seeing this regular black couple go through this, normal, couple issues. And so, but it's tough to watch, and you got to take those cool downs, man, of it. And one of the things I was thinking, and like I said, can't turn the therapist's brain off, is, it's one of those things you see oftentimes in, couples who have been together about that long, who have kids that are getting older and more independent, and all of a sudden when your kids are young, they need all of your attention, and that takes several years to get through, and all of a sudden you grow up. You many years have passed. You're a much different person than you used to be, and trying to get to know a partner again is difficult. And so you see that it's got to be hard for them, with the girl going off to school and Junior getting bigger, and Diane, and what's the other one's name?
Diane and Jack.
Diane and Jack, are independent. They don't need help, and but then you also have the dynamic of the new baby,
Yeah.
and it's all kind of happening at one time, and it's it's tough. It's tough. You've got to, you're relearning who your partner is.
Yeah.
And, I'm sure Bo is relearning what it's like to be a mother of a child that small. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And all those years pass, and people are just bound to be different anyway. So I think a lot of that came together, at the end of the fourth season. You get to kind of witness that, and that made it tough. It is that right there, what they're trying to get through, that's the work in a relationship. That's the work. That is the work right there.
Yeah. So, question. Let's say, so I know they did couples counseling at maybe 1 or 2 episodes at some point during the end. Let's say Dr. Jordan, their therapist, they're coming in. Let's say they've seen you 2 sessions, 2-3 sessions.
Uh-huh.
What are you guys working on? What are you telling them? What are you trying to help them with?
Just right now, you're doing my job better than me. I just want you to know that. You're hosting better than I am. That's a great question.
I appreciate it. I am quite the Renaissance man. Cook, clean, build things. Putting in that plug again, but yeah, Dr. Jordan.
Honestly, man, I'm wanting them to get to know each other again, and to get to know the things that they think they know already about their partner. There's that one powerful scene where they're talking about the kitchen, and they're trying to guess what the other's favorite color is, and get and then they're lobbing the bombs at each other, talking about, oh, you didn't keep up on the dishes, or oh, you've never done a dish in your life, kind of thing. And I think she was it Bo guesses that Dre's favorite color is green or something, and it's not.
Yeah,
and
because he has all those jackets that are green.
Right. Yeah. And so I would want them to I'd be really trying to get to know them and have them get to know each other again, and talking about the ways in which they've changed as they've gotten older, and as they've kind of grown in their relationship, grown as parents, grown as people. Who are they now? And really I'm not trying to do too much. I'm not trying to go crazy, but I just want them to know each other. That would be what I'm working on.
Okay.
And they're not in a space, I think, with all that ruthless passive aggressiveness that they have going, they're not in a space, I think, to have difficult conversation.
Yeah.
So we just start with, who are you? That's what I'm doing.
Okay.
That's what I'm doing.
I like it.
What about you, man? Dr. Jones?
Dr. Jones.
Dr. Jones. I think similar. I think, so I echo everything that you said. I think if I can get, more specific in how I would make that look in the room, in the sense of I would want this to, in a way, be for me to get to know them. but I would be really intentional about making sure when they're talking, when they're saying stuff, when they're asking questions, that they're doing it to each other and not to me. Because like you were saying, they're trying to get to know each other again. I don't want to be this, okay, you ask me a question and then I'm going to tell you about this. And then I'm going to turn to your partner and tell you what I just heard.
Right.
I think they're in the place to where they need to talk to each other about these things and really learn who each other is and to connect with each other. And of course, I would interject, moderate, mediate, however I would need be and what that would look like. But I think it's really important that they hear it from each other.
I feel that.
What about you, Eric?
And this might, I agree with everything you guys are saying, and I probably would start there, but I'm thinking about like that example you gave about like what color is his favorite color. And I remember how dejected he looked when she was wrong. And like, you know, in a relationship you've been with for a while, a lot of times a couple might be like, no, that's not my favorite color, and just kind of move on. Because I'm really curious about the significance of that and like how, what was it like for him to like, for her to be wrong or for her not to know his favorite color, and get in touch with that idea. And I'm very curious about like taking it a step further, like, and looking at each other and, okay, so this is how you felt in that situation. How would you like to feel with your partner? How would you like your partner to feel around you? And vice versa for Bo as well. So not just thinking about like, yes, you felt really bad in that situation. How would you like to feel? But also, how would you like, what kind of feelings do you want your partner to have about you?
So
and how do you
some
start
of those
taking the
concrete
steps to get
things
there?
more meaningful? In a way.
Yeah.
I feel that.
So where do you see these two going in the future?
I'm gonna give this assist to Jordan and let him start this one off.
So their relationship, where do I see it going?
Yes.
Well, you know, because it's a show, I think they'll try, and they're making money off of it. I think they'll try, you know, keep together.
That's what
But I think
I'm thinking too. That's what I'm gonna give it to Jordan.
they're making too much money to stop the show right now. But I think if this were a couple, like I'd genuinely be concerned for their future. But if I know that if they had a history like Bo and Dre have,
Yeah.
and all that Bo and Dre have shared, I think there is so much that, you know, so much good that you can draw on and good memories that I think that you can use that to spark future work. Now, it appears that there have been those kind of major, I think, attachment injuries between the two of them over time that have been, you know, just ugly. And there's definitely, if you're thinking about it in terms of Gottman stuff, there's a lot of that contempt going on in their relationship, particularly in that scene we were just talking about. But I do think that they have a lot to draw on. I think they have a lot to draw on, man. And I think with their history, I would feel hopeful and can be hopeful about their relationship. More hopeful than others.
I think the biggest thing was at the end of the season when they're in therapy after they've kind of reconciled a little bit, talking about the fact that they're not done and they need to keep working, I think is a really good sign. I think that that's a kind of scene that they didn't have to do. They could have just done the TV thing and said like, oh, they reconciled, everything's better. But to acknowledge the fact that, yes, they've reconciled a little bit, but like they have so much work to do and kind of keep working on it. And the fact they're willing to do that for each other, that gives me the hope.
Yeah. I'm with you. This is highlighting just those exceptions, those unique outcomes. And I think John Legend said it best, taking it slow. They that's working with that couple. That's not going to be a 6 sessions and you're out of here. Definitely taking the time, which is something I could say when I was a more novice therapist and my own identity idea of what a therapist should look like and how progress should look, all those shoulds again. I know this is a podcast about scholarship and all, but for any therapists, clinicians who may be listening as well, knowing that the hair doesn't always win the race. And in this case, this is a prime example of taking it slow, being very intentional about what you're doing. Allowing them the space to do the work that they need to do is really important.
Yeah. Do you want to sing us out with John Legend?
You sure you want that?
Well, I'll drop the. Remember, ladies, Relevate Podcast at gmail.com.
Yep.
And thanks to you for listening today. If you want to become a part of Relevation Nation and get daily information about romantic relationships, or just want to learn more about Relevate, like us on Facebook at facebook.com/myrelevate, follow us on Twitter at myrelevate, or on Instagram at instagram.com/myrelevate. Special thanks to our producer and the composer of our opening music, Denzel Jones. See you next time.